Alrighty guys, welcome back to another one. I got to looking through our whole YouTube library and I noticed something that was missing. Out of all the videos we have done, we haven't done one dedicated to specifically 9-pellet double-aught buckshot in 12 gauge. That is probably the most common 12 gauge buckshot load that people do. It's certainly the most common 12 gauge buckshot load on the market. Virtually every manufacturer of shot shells loads some form of a 12 gauge 9-pellet double-aught buck. We're going to keep this video kind of simple and right to the basics. A few things you guys should know before we move on with the video is this one is going to be geared towards a new shot shell reloader. I'll be going into some detail about the differences in some hulls and some wads, differences in types of powder, whether it be fast burning or slow burning powder, different types of double-aught buck, and the way these can be loaded. So to start things off, there are 3 different sizes for double-aught buck. This is my hard cast 33 caliber double-aught buck. I cast these myself. I don't have any 32 caliber, but typically off-the-shelf factory double-aught buck loads are 32 caliber. And then you have 31 caliber. Some manufacturers, like Fiocchi, in some of their loads anyway, use 31 caliber. This is some nickel-plated 31 caliber, which is actually single-aught buck. I pulled these out of Fiocchi Exacta Buckshot 12 gauge. It's labeled a 9-pellet double-aught buck, but if we measure these, it's 31 caliber. On the scale, it's 43 grains, which is single-aught. There are some manufacturers that will use 31 caliber and call it double-aught, even though it is single-aught. Now, I took these out of the Fiocchi Exacta shells because just by looking at it inside there, clear hull, I knew it wasn't double-aught buck. One reason is because it's noticeably smaller, and 2, they were stacked by 3s inside of a shot cup. The shot cup being the upper part of the wad where the pedals are. Let me try that again. The upper part of the wad where the pedals are. Now, 33 caliber will not stack by 3s in a shot cup. It's too big. Whereas 31 caliber will. 9 pellets of true 33 caliber full-grown double-aught buck weighs roughly 1 1/8 ounces. It's just a hair under it, 1.1 ounces instead of the 1.125. That is 1 1/8 ounces. 9 pellets of the 32 cal double-aught weighs right at 1 1/16 ounces, in between 1 ounce and 1 1/8 ounces. 9 pellets of 31, which is what this is right at 1 ounce. What size am I using today? 33 caliber, true double-aught buck. To load these, you can use quite literally whatever 2 3/4 inch 12 gauge hull you have, or that's on the market. 2 of the hulls I'll be using today is a clear, brand new primed Fiocchi. You can go to places like Ballistic Products, Precision Reloading, Grafts, and a few others, and get brand new primed hulls. The other hull I'm using is probably the most common hull on the planet for 12 gauge, and that is the Winchester Super Target. Now, a lot of people say that these are non-reloadable, but yes, they are. Me and Josh, whenever we first started loading 12 gauge, we had a pile of these, and we still do. I had a box under my kitchen table with over 1,000 of these hulls in it, and like I said, when we first started loading 12 gauge, this was pretty much all we had, and we wore them out. So there's 3 kinds of hulls that you guys will run into in, modern times. We have what's called a straight wall, which is stuff like Fiocchi and most Federals. You have a polyformed, which is stuff like the Winchester Super Target. I'll get into that in just a second. AA HS. Again, I'll get into this in just a second. Then you have stuff with a fiber base wad. This is actually 16 gauge. Notice the purple. Federal 16 gauge ammo is purple. But these have a fiber base wad. If you look down inside them, you'll notice the brown base wad indicating it is fiber. This Federal obviously has a plastic base wad. People say all the time, do not ever reload fiber base wad shot shells, or if you do, it's a one and done. But guys, that's simply not true. They'll say stuff like the fiber base wad will eventually lift up out of the bottom of the shell, which is true, but I've never had it happen, and I have loaded Federal 10 gauge shells, which do have a fiber base wad, many times. I've never had that issue. But it is always a good idea after loading and firing these to look down inside the hull with a flashlight, just like this, and check the base wad to make sure it is not lifting. It is possible for that base wad to come out upon firing and get lodged in your barrel after all the shot and stuff leaves, and the next round you fire, well, that's a bore obstruction. And you know what happens with bore obstructions? Well, they cause a barrel burst. They can cause a barrel burst. But like I said, I've never had an issue. Now, moving on to this one. This is the original AA, the old style. These are compression formed. You'll notice there is no base wad. The plastic is all one piece. These are tapered hulls. The only compression formed hulls that are still on the market are actually made by Remington. This is a Nitro 27 or Nitro Gold. You'll see it's the same internal design as that original AA. If you look closely, you'll notice this Federal here, the new high overall, looks suspiciously like the Nitro Gold here. Well, that's because it's the exact same hull. The Remington STS, Nitro 27s, American Clay and Fields, and the new Federal high overall are just Remington STS hulls. The high overall is obviously maroon. Can't figure out why the Nitro Gold is called Nitro Gold. No idea, that one stumps me. The STS looks just like this, but green. And the Clay and Fields are green also, but they are translucent. Remington Gun Club and Game Load hulls are also compression formed. They do not have a separate base wad, it's a one-piece hull. Winchester currently makes a new version of the original AA. They call it the AAHS, which stands for high strength. Now these are polyformed. This is the third kind of shell that you'll run into. You'll notice that both the Super Target here has a separate base wad, as well as the AAHS. This is actually an older HS, indicated by the red base wad. Modern HS hulls have the white, just like the Super Target here. So again, the three types of hulls are straight wall, polyformed, and compression formed. And then if you want to consider this a fourth one, fiber-based wad straight wall hulls. Moving on to wads here, well, you have two different styles. By that, I'm not referring to what wad it is, I'm referring to the hull it's meant for. This is a tapered wall wad meant for your tapered shells like the AA, the HS, the Super Target, and these back here. This wad right here is actually the short shell wad from Ballistic Products. It's made by Gwandi. It is for straight wall hulls, like the Federal with clear Fiocchi, and that 16 gauge if it was a 12 gauge. Tapered hulls have a smaller internal diameter down towards the bottom of the hull. Straight wall shells are just that, straight wall. There is no taper. It's one diameter all the way down. And to make that easier to understand, I have a pair of calipers here. You see it's set to 0. We're going to measure the, let's do this one here first. Should measure roughly 7.2, 7.3. Now it says 7.1, but I think that's just me. Let me adjust it here. 7.2. Now for the tapered wad, any guess as to what this is going to measure? Well, let's see. 6.8. Take another stab at it. We have 4.8. That's not right. 6.9. So that's quite a bit of difference there. Now these tapered hulls at the bottom, they step down to 14 gauge. 14 gauge bore diameter is 0.693, and that's what these are down here. So can you use the tapered wads in straight wall hulls? Yes, you can. And the way to do it is take a 1 inch by 1 inch piece of napkin or paper towel and set that over your hull, then insert the wad. That will stop what's called powder migration. That happens due to, say, you're using this hull, you have a powder charge in it, you set this wad over the powder, you give it a good shake, that powder is going to come back up and leach around this wad. That's because the bottom of this wad is much smaller than the internal diameter of this hull. Another solution is to take a pair of needle nose pliers and pinch out the bottom of the wad. This is called the gas skirt. Just pinch that out until it fits the diameter of the straight wall hulls. One more thing you can do is add what's called a nitro card. I'm trying to grab one out of here. A nitro card over the powder. These are the same diameter as the straight wall hulls. Over the powder, and then set your wad over that. and you do not have to worry about powder migration. So pros and cons of the straight wall hull. Well, you get way more capacity in here, lower pressure, you can drive the loads way faster. Downside is they don't last as long. You have to use a little bit more powder, just a grain or 2 or 3, depending on powder, to get the same velocity you would get using less powder in a tapered hull. For instance, if we're using red dot and we want a 1200 FPS load, you need 20 grains in a straight wall hull. For a tapered hull, 18.5 grains will get you 1200 FPS with an 1.1 ounce load for both hulls. Pros of the tapered hulls are these last a really long time. Now these original AA's here are touted to be the best reloading hull ever made. It doesn't matter what press you use to crimp these on, the crimp usually comes out looking like it just left the factory. And in my experience, that is absolutely true. These hulls are great. Tapered hulls last a really long time. Another pro is the exact opposite of the straight wall. You can use less powder to get the same performance for a given load, you know. Another downside is these do not have the same capacity as a straight wall hull. The top end lead shot load for a tapered hull is 1.5 ounces for a straight wall. I've seen factory loads that are up to 1.5 ounces. I've seen 2 ounce loads for a 2 3/4 inch straight wall hull for a TSS shot. 1 1/8 ounce of steel, 1 3/8 ounce of bismuth, 1 5/8 ounce of buckshot. I've done that. Number 4 buck fits great. I've never seen data over 1.5 ounces in these. Not specifically these, I'm talking about tapered hulls in general. If you're just wanting to load buckshot, well, I recommend using a straight wall hull. You can get a lot more velocity out of these, typically speaking, with a straight wall hull. But if you're wanting a bunch of reloads without having to have a bunch of hulls laying around, this is the way you want to go. Whether it be original AA, you can get them once fired, the AA HS, or any of the Remington hulls, or the Federal High Overall, those load a long, long time. You'll notice the Fiocchi has a low brass, and the Federal here has a high brass. Now, does that mean this Federal can handle more pressure? Nope. There is no functional difference between high brass and low brass. You can put the hottest 2 3/4 inch magnum load in this hull right here, and it'll work just fine, or you can do it in this hull, and it'll work just fine. In modern times, high brass is mostly cosmetic. A common thing people do if they're, carrying low brass and high brass shells at the same time, well, they'll reach in their pocket and feel for the high brass, and that tells them that that load is a little bit, more stout. Or on the other side of that, they'll reach in there, feel the low brass, and they'll know that's a little bit lighter load. But to reloaders, they don't make a bit of difference. So now we're going to talk about powder for a moment. There are 3 things you should know before buying any powder, and that is, we have fast burning powder, we have really slow burning powder for heavy magnum loads, and we have stuff right in between. This is a medium speed powder. Red dot is for stuff like, I'm just using a line powder as an example here, but red dot is for light loads like your target loads, dove loads, clay loads, stuff like that, but you can absolutely load buckshot and slugs with it too. You're just not going to be loading up magnum shells with this. Red dot will do 7/8 ounce to 1.1 ounce loads, no problem, even down to 3/4 ounce if you want a light load at very high speeds. Green dot will do up to 1.25 ounce, and that is for 12 gauge. I'm specifically talking about just 12 gauge here. Now blue dot here, this is one of my favorite powders. It's for very heavy magnum loads. You can do up to 2.5 ounce loads in 12 gauge with this, 3.5 inch, and 3 inch if you're using a slug. There are 2.5 ounce slugs out there. You can also use it in 2 3/4 inch if you want some heavy loads, or 1.1 ounce loads at some high speed. Other really common powders are stuff like long shot. This is actually my favorite powder. It's useful for all gauges. Even 410 if you want to load a very lightweight slug at some ridiculous speed. Long shot is another very slow burning magnum powder. HS6 is a medium to slow burning powder. It's almost as slow as long shot, but not quite. These two are also magnum powders. AA Super Handicap is a medium to fast burning powder. Also a very good one, another one of our favorite powders. Winchester WSF is a medium burn speed powder. You can find this pretty much anywhere. I see it all over the place around here. You can do 1.25 ounce loads with this. Tight Group is a very fast burning powder. It's a little bit faster than Red Dot. It's good for up to 1.1 ounce, but don't expect high velocities. International Clays, this powder is actually pretty hard to get right now, but it's another medium burn speed powder comparable to Green Dot. Not quite as slow, but it's certainly not as fast as Red Dot or Tiger. Clays, this one is a fast burning target shell powder, just like Red Dot. And this crazy stuff right here, this is Little Gun. Mainly, it's a 410 and 28 gauge powder, but it's a lot slower than Blue Dot. It doesn't really have many uses in gauges past 20 gauge, but this stuff is slow enough to where you can actually load 3 ounce 10 gauge loads with it, 2 3/4 ounce 12 gauge, ounce and 3/4 16 gauge, ounce and 5/8 20 gauge, and so on. Great for outrageously heavy, crazy magnum loads in the larger gauges. If you're just getting into SHOT Show reloading, don't bother with Little Gun unless you're loading 410 or 28 gauge. But if you're just wanting to load 12 gauge, do not bother with Little Gun. That is a big load only powder. There are quite a few options out there, depending on how much velocity you want. If you just want standard velocities, I'd go with Red Dot or Clays if you can find them. If you want high velocities, a little bit of a magnum load, I suggest a Longshot or HS6. And if you want some heavier magnum loads, stuff like maybe a 12 pellet load or a 15 pellet load in 3-inch, go with Blue Dot or Longshot. If you have Blue Dot and you're wanting to do a 9 pellet load, well, you're going to have to use quite a bit of powder, over double what you would have to use if you're just using Red Dot. An example of that being, you can use 17 grains of Red Dot and that'll get you 1145 FPS. And with Blue Dot, you're going to have to use powder charges in the high 30s to low 40s, but that will get you some great velocity. I'm talking like 1400 FPS. The two powders that you can find pretty much anywhere right now are Winchester AA Super Handicap and Superfield. Both of them will do a 9 pellet load just fine. I think I mentioned this earlier, but another super common powder you can pretty much find anywhere right now is Longshot. And again, that one will get you some serious velocity. It's a magnum powder. So anyway, how about we actually get to loading one up now? I'm starting off with the straight wall Fiocchi here. This one already is primed. The powder I'm using is Red Dot. This is going to be a 1200 FPS load. We need 20 grains of it. You'll obviously need a scale to reload. Alright, we have our 20 grains. You always want to double check that, even triple check it if you aren't sure. That is 20 grains. And again, this is going to be a 1200 FPS load, ounce and 1/8. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, we need a straight wall wad. This one is the short shell wad from Ballistic Products. It's made by Gwandi. You can also get them from Precision Reloading. With these, the petals can be torn straight off. Set that right over top of your powder. The reason why you have to tear the petals off is the 33 caliber double-aught buck does not stack by 3s inside the wad. They stack by 2s. A 9 is not a multiple of 2. It just wouldn't be even. A 10 pellet load of 33 cal double-aught buck would be ounce and 1/4. Now we need to build up what's called stack height. That is the height of your components inside the hull, including the lead shot. To build that up, I'm just using two 12 gauge overshot cards. Both of these are 70 thousandths. Together they make about 1/8 of an inch. So set that right over top of the wad. Get it even. That looks just like this. We need 9 pellets of 33 caliber double-aught buck. These will stack by 3 in here, no problem. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. There's your 9 pellets. Now before you crimp this, there are a few things that you can do here. One is add buffer. Buffer is a powder. I'll show you here, hold on. It's a powder that goes around your pellets, and at extended ranges they help keep the pattern together. With buffer, the pellets won't slam into each other upon firing quite as hard, which keeps them more round, which means they'll fly better. A round object flies much straighter than a square object. Another thing you can do is take a Mylar wrap and put that in the hull before your buckshot. And what a Mylar wrap is a very thin piece of really tough plastic. They're quite literally overhead projector sheets. and they act as a shot cup of sorts, which can again help with patterns at extended ranges. They're thin enough to where you can still stack the 33 cal double-aught buck by threes. But we're not adding buffer or a Mylar wrap to this load, we're just keeping it simple. If you want to, you can add a third nitro card underneath the pellets, but I'm not doing that. What I'm doing is putting one over top the pellets, just for a much nicer looking crimp. And that's what that looks like. I'm using a Lee Lodahl. It has both a 6-point and an 8-point crimp starter. You don't have to worry about that with brand new prime tools. You can choose either one, whichever you want, a 6-point or an 8-point. I'm doing a 6-point on this, so back station of the Lee Lodahl. Here's our pre-crimp. The final crimp tube is the very last station. And this is what our completed shell looks like. It actually looks really cool. Clear hulls are great because you can just see what's inside of them. So if you're using tapered hulls like this Winchester Super Target here, you need a different wad, but the loading procedure is much the same. This hull is actually a twice fired, so we need to deprime, resize, and reprime this, which is easy. The Lee Lodahl comes with a resize ring. Here's mine. It looks like this. You need the ring on the ring, up, facing up. Set that over your hull. The first station on the Lee Lodahl is the depriming and resizing station. You'll notice that kick the primer out and resize the hull. Make sure it's flush with the ring. I'm using a shut-out primer here, but any standard strength primer will work. Don't use a magnum primer here. The hull goes up on the tube right beside the depriming punch. And this will kick the ring off and install your new primer. Once again, we're using red dot. I'm using 17 grains this time. It's going to get me an 1145 FPS load. That is 17 grains. Again, always double check it. Yep. 17. Now in this shell, we need a tapered wad. This is the Claybuster orange 12 gauge wad. I'll put up the actual name of it right here. You have to trim the petals off this or the pellets just won't fit unless you're using 32 caliber or 31. Once you trim the petals off, you want to make sure you got all of it and the top of this is good and even, and this one is. Set your hull underneath your wad guide. Wad goes in the wad guide and send it home. You're going to want to add some compression to this to make sure the powder is on the wad is on the powder good, which this one is. You don't hear any powder rattle. Again, 9 pellets of double-aught buck. Again, I'm using an overshot card here. This one's actually for 16 gauge, but it's pretty thin. Set it right over top your pellets. This needs to go to the front station of the Lee Lodahl because this is an 8-point crimp hull, and you want the valley right here in the crimp facing you. Try to show you better. Right here. The valley, not one of the points. You need the valley facing you. Here's the pre-crimp. Now the 6-point station is actually the opposite. You want one of the points in the crimp facing you on it. For the final crimp, it doesn't matter whether you have the point or the valley facing you. And we end up with a really nice looking crimp. The point of the overshot card is to make really nice looking crimps. Without it, with buckshot anyway, you can get some of the petals to cave in a little bit or be a little bit uneven, and that's just ugly, but it doesn't matter. They'll shoot all the same. The overshot is just to make the crimps look nice. And it brings up stack height just a little bit if you're a little bit low. So now with the standard velocity loads out of the way, this is for you guys that have magnum-itis like me and Josh do. I'm using the Federal here. Again, it's straight wall resize ring. We're going to knock this primer out and resize the hull. Got it. The primer again is just a Shadot. We are now deprimed and resized and reprimed. Powder I'm using this time is my favorite one, 37 grains of long shot. This is going to get you almost 1600 FPS. Alright, we have our 37 grains. As always, double check it. Yes, 37 grains. Once again, using the short shell wad from Ballistic Products. Tear the petals off. Wad guide. Set your wad in there. The press can't actually put this wad all the way on top of the powder, so take your finger and finish setting on the powder. Shake it, make sure it's not rattling. The punch right here isn't long enough. Once again, 2 overshot cards. That's to bring up stack height. And this is what that looks like. 9 pellets of 33 cal double aught. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. At least we know I can count to 9. And over top of that, another 70 thousandths 12 gauge nitro card. We are right where we need to be for a really nice looking crimp. This one also has an 8-point. So front station of the reload all. You want the valley and the crimp facing you. Here's our pre-crimp. And give it a final crimp. What I like to do is pull down multiple times. Pull it down once, turn the hull, pull down, turn the hull, pull down, and that gets you a really nice uniform looking crimp. And a very nice looking shell. If you're just getting into reloading, I wouldn't load magnum loads like this until you really know what you're doing. You really don't want to mess up when it comes to loading. And this is a really hot magnum load. If you want to load that one, I'd start at 34 grains. Use the same components, just start at 34 and work your way up to 37. Because that 37 grain charge, if you're not used to recoil, is actually quite stout out of a light gun. We're used to shooting 3-ounce 10 gauge loads for fun, so recoil doesn't bother us at all. If you're wondering what that rumbling noise in the background throughout the whole video was, that is my rock tumbler. I cast some buckshot earlier, triple aught, and tumbling it in my rock tumbler to polish it up. Makes it more round, nice and shiny. We have a Patreon if you guys want to go check that out. It's as low as $1 a month, and like we always say, every penny goes right back into the channel. A link to that will be in the description below, as well as our Instagram and our Rumble accounts. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave it in the comment section down below, and we will get back to you. Please like and subscribe. We always appreciate that. And until next time, you guys take it easy. We'll see you in the next one.